pastels and bold colors, and a hint of Art Deco. This is 1980s aesthetic at its finest. Whether sun-faded prints in a Korean hair salon or your own framed poster in your dorm room, the image is familiar if not surprisingly recognizable. The quintessential image of 80s excess is synonymous with the Nagel woman. From Playboy to Popular Mechanics, the art of Patrick Nagel on this Pop Connection.
Get away from her, you bitch!
This is PopCon, a salute to all pop culture, but mostly the 80s. I'm your host, Victor, and welcome to the show. Perhaps because it is of my formidable years, but many relics of our past act as a great substitute for a time machine. So come back with me now and make a pop connection with the undeniably 80s style of prolific artist Patrick Nagel. His art may perhaps be the epitome of the 1980s aesthetic, but Patrick Nagel studied and successfully fulfilled his art career in the 70s after flying with the US Army in Vietnam. His ideal woman would develop as he worked on commissions for graphic design by the likes of ABC Television, Architectural Digest, Harper's Bazaar, Rolling Stone, and Universal Studios. Playboy began commissioning a piece of art for each month in 1975. By 1977, the adult magazine began to stop giving him direction and allowed him to blossom as his art became much more widespread and his style was coming into its own. So much so it was recognized in an instant by casual fans. Pop art with Art Deco. The majority of his work may have been female, but his male subjects were just as striking and could be found in the fashion marketing and magazines for some of the most talented designers of the day. The Nagel woman developed during those 285 pieces he made for Playboy. It was his ideal woman who was pale with the black hair. Working in mixed media on board, paper, or canvas, he painted fine illustrations for a variety of companies. Although working with big design names such as Ralph Lauren, Perry Ellis, and more, it was an album cover that would solidify Nagel's place in pop culture during its heyday that marks the real turning point. Rio by Duran Duran in 1982 is a signature look of Nagel's most of us can identify. Although this album was certified platinum in 1983, it was not the first time the artist made an album cover, as the 70s found him busy creating cover art for the likes of Tommy James, Charlene, and Thelma Houston of Don't Leave Me This Way fame. It was the early part of the decade, but Nagel was not only getting praise, but recognition and celebrity star power. Joan Collins, known for showcasing the strong 80s woman in shoulder pads and her actions during her nighttime soap opera Dynasty, was a muse of Nagel's, and he proudly revealed his illustrated doppelganger of the star in 1982. You may not recognize her immediately, but another actress put to pen and brush by Patrick was that of Joanna Cassidy. If you don't know her from Blade Runner, you may know her as Dolores from the 1988 film Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Playboy did have a look for their art, and today you can find many nudes, scantily clad, and downright sexually provocative designs during the era. But after 1984, when he completed his work for them, the imagery seemed to have shifted to a more positive, if not optimistic and confident woman in bold and striking designs, evoking a more powerful nature than submissive. Like a Swatch watch hanging on your wall, the Nagel woman looked down on many a bedroom and businesses during the mid-80s. The design is undoubtedly anachronistic and nailed Patrick Nagel's place in the era's pop culture pantheon. Riding high in the mid-80s, you could see his inspiration in many places. One area that seems to have gleamed from the Nagel method is both surprising and completely understandable: toy shelves. The era stands alone as the most fertile partnership between toy maker and media marketing giant. It is then not a far throw to imagine the influence Nagel may have had on up-and-coming artists of the time, specifically staff artists in the booming toy industry. With a new brand of doll that also obviously characterized the 80s and mirrored the MTV generation, the box art for Hasbro's rock and roll music toy line Jem and the Holograms contains some of the most beautifully represented figure illustrations of any of the popular toys of the time, and the majority of them used hand-painted box art to help sell the product by artist Sharon Nettles. The Jem franchise included women of that same ideal in form and authority. No diversity in shape or size, but a perfect figure in tandem with color and the geometrical patterns defining the generation all too similar to ignore.
I watched this great video, but don't remember the name of it.
Didn't you subscribe to the channel?
Subscribing is the best thing you can do. Commenting is awesome.
Subscribing
Means you support the creator's content.
It was mostly about 80s pop culture.
That was probably PopCon. It's outrageous.
Okay, I'll go subscribe right away.
Remember, subscribing to PopCon makes you a superstar.
Did you own a Nagel? I don't remember ever having one, just seeing one everywhere. Let me know in the comments if you owned one and which one, or maybe another artist of the 80s that I can cover on a future show. Alex Israel, who Duran Duran hired to create the album art for their 2015 release Paper Gods, which visually references Nagel's famous Rio cover, said of Nagel's work, captured the emotional state of an era, 1980s American desire, collective materialistic aspiration, a less than zero state of mind. For the uninitiated, Less Than Zero was not just an Elvis Costello song or a 1987 film with Andrew McCarthy and Robert Downey Jr., but a novel about a young man coming home from winter break at college in 1984. Estranged from the culture at home, he grows tired of the excessive drug-fueled party scene while watching dear friends spiral out of control and witnesses the complete lack of apathy for friends towards anyone else's suffering. And after experiencing the diversions on both ends of the spectrum, he heads back to school at the end of a traumatizing and eye-opening holiday. Now, most people saw the bright pastel excess and high fashion model ideal woman as a statement for sure, but perhaps not as heavy as the content of Less Than Zero. Patrick Nagel was not short-lived, but his golden age did not last out of the 1980s, and after his death in 1984 from a heart attack put on by All Things, participating in another great star-infused 80s trend, the Aerobathon, his work tended to take a low point and was referenced more as a joke, or something less than valuable as an enormous knockoff business of his paintings ran amok in the late 80s in every beauty salon. Nagel did few interviews, and although he did collaborate with magician David Copperfield for a TV special, we may never know what he felt about his work slapped on t-shirts and other disposable items, or marketed toward women. It seems to some that he would have approved his images for more traditionally masculine pursuits, like beer packaging or car advertising, since, as his biographer claims, the beauty of the woman Nagel painted were solely for men's enjoyment. Nagel's work, no matter your personal preference, is such that if you simply look around, you will find its trace and homage in a number of places. There is either duplication, inspiration, or representation found in such media today as the show Stranger Things, the eerie series that introduced Barb, the initial victim in Season 1 being immortalized on merchandise evoking Duran Duran. Or Grand Theft Auto, Vice City, where a main character is immortalized in her own Nagel style. Not to mention the Vice eye makeup line by Urban Decay. Of course, there's also the 2011 American Dad episode that creates Patrick himself in their distinct animation style and sends the character Steve back in time to discover the creation of the piece of art he has found himself enamored with. What about the short-lived animated comedy series Moonbeam City, which relied heavily on the style and the feel of those iconic illustrations for their character designs and overall look? And finally, more modern, there's Marvel, who represented by showing the just returned to Bruce Banner Hulk needing a t-shirt and is given one by Tony Stark, emblazoned with the famous cover that made Nagel mainstream in 1982, Rio. Luckily, everything old is new again, and it was only the passage of time that would take to bring back Nagel's work to the modern masses. Its recent resurgence has brought back with it a popular and critical reevaluation. Completely recovered from his low period in the late 80s, his work now holds a place in the pop art tradition of Lichtenstein and Warhol, writes pop culture critic Jacob Shelton. Say what you may about the 80s, but the decade provides us more Renaissance than the Renaissance, if not plenty of topics for pop culture evaluation. If you dig a little deeper, you might find some not-so-friendly descriptions of the artist. This was not to cover him as a person, although it's his personality that's highly suspect over his art. It might be his time at Playboy and the art that commissioned by the magazine. But a deep dive into the book, The Artist That Loved Women, you'll find some less than desirable traits about Nagel. It's true, there are no misconduct or harassment charges against him, but he is dead. None may ever arise. But there is a lot to ponder. As to Patrick, women were divine, and divinity tolerated no imperfection. Thanks for joining us on the show today. Hope you liked it, and I hope you'll subscribe. If you're interested in any of the fashion doll artwork you saw displayed today, you can click the link in the description and follow the artist Collection 82. That art and others is available. Also, please remember to share and comment and even notify. Until next time.